Good evening, everybody. Excited to be here with you tonight. I think sometimes, my grandfather used to say, sometimes you got to know when to shut up. And I don't know if I should speak after that because it's probably not going to get me better than what the message Dudley just gave and the kind words he shared about me. I have the privilege tonight of telling you or sharing with you God's story in my life. I don't want to do it. It's embarrassing. I'm not proud of most of my life. But I made a promise that when he rescued me, when I got to experience redemption through his love, grace, and mercy, that if anybody ever wanted to hear about it, I'd talk about it. So I'm here to tell you a bit about that, and then to tell you how that redemption and that new life, that rebirth, has led me to a ministry that who would have ever thought that I'd be standing on a stage of a church sharing with you all, and that I would be involved in a ministry, because when you hear the first part of it, you're like, what are you doing? But excited to be here. You know, I'm a Texan. I grew up in Amarillo. My family are a blue-collar family. My family migrated from Tennessee. The story is my great-grandfather fell in love with my great-grandmother when they were 14. Our family were the sharecroppers, and they were the family that owned the land. And that was forbidden at the time. So they stole one of their horses and they eloped to Texas. And they were going through the Panhandle and around Skellytown. They were drilling oil wells. And my great-grandfather got a job pulling an ox and a plow to level the fields where they would build the oil field storage tanks. And there was no workforce housing back then. So they lived in what they call a dugout. Just a hole in the ground. And when my great-grandmother was pregnant with my grandmother, the oil well, I guess, had finished, and the chuck wagon that had been there feeding the workers left to another job. And I guess that it was too cumbersome to move the cook shack on the back of the chuck wagon with it. So the cook shack gets left behind, and our family moved out of a hole in the ground into a cook shack. And that's where we got started. So this is the background that I come from. And I was raised pretty old school. I mean, men were supposed to be tough. Men were supposed to be strong. You were defined by your character and your work ethic. And that message was honed in on me deeply. And we went to church all the time, too. And you don't really get the same message in church, so it's confusing. But I didn't ever really understand church, truth be told. I would watch how we would act and interact as a family all week, and then we would go to church, and I would see how they acted at church, and I was like, this isn't the same people that I just left my house with. I just don't understand. I understand in hindsight that what I was really looking for is I was looking for flaws in the faith and in the church because I didn't want to obey or serve anything. I wanted to live my life. So it's real easy when you don't want to submit to find flaws in things and then use that as a scapegoat, not to live the life you're to live. So that's what I did. And when I left home, I played nice, went to church and did all the things. I was not a good kid. I was in church all the time that they could open the doors. And sometimes I think my parents talked them into unlocking the doors so we could come more often. And when I left to go to college, I never went back. And went to the University of Oklahoma on a wrestling scholarship. When we got there, the first day, 1984, right after the 1984 Summer Olympics, I thought I was all that. I walked into this room and we had 3 Olympians, 2 gold medalists and a bronze medalist. And I was like, I don't belong here. And they give us this lecture, and we were the top-ranked team in the country at that time. And all the pictures of the champions all around the wrestling room, these gentlemen that are on our team that just came back from the Olympics with these medals. And the coach says, look, here's the deal. Of all of you in this room, there's going to be 3 of you maybe that wind up doing what it takes to have your picture on the wall. And then let me tell you what's going to happen to the rest of you. Some of you aren't going to go to class. Some of you have already reached your full potential. You don't have what it takes to elevate, to come to this level. Some of you are going to think the girls are more fun than come to the practice. All these other reasons. And then he handed out these shirts that said on the front, Oklahoma Wrestling, and on the back it said, if it is to be, it's up to me. Same message I got my whole life. I was fortunate to be blessed enough academically that I could get by in school and enough athletically that I could participate in things like that. So it was possible, if I applied myself, that I could do whatever I put my mind to do. And I didn't understand what was happening, but I was slowly becoming my own God because I believed in myself. I believed in my own merits. I believed in what I could do. And then all of a sudden, life started getting difficult. Things started happening. And I just kept stuffing it down because that's how I was raised. Men are supposed to be strong. We have to be there for everybody else. And so I kept stuffing stuff down. Graduated from college. I married, I think, the prettiest girl in school, convinced her I was a better guy than I was. We wound up having kids. I wanted sons. We have 2 sons. I wanted to start a company. I wanted to live in the Pacific Northwest. We moved to Portland, Oregon. We started a business. Everything that I wanted, that I worked for, I got. This became something I started to believe deeply in. And then all of a sudden, 2.5 years after arriving in Oregon, my wife has a sore that on her tongue. And we love to eat. I didn't eat for 5 years in college. So, man, when I got out of that, I was like, I want to eat everything I can. And we love to eat. She was athletic. And the doctors started saying, well, we think it's some kind of food allergy, so don't eat these things. We didn't do that very well, but when it would bother her, she would. And then one day, it started bothering her so much, she's like, okay, I've got to get serious and follow the doctor's orders. And she started following the orders, and it didn't get better. So we were getting ready to take our first vacation since we arrived to Oregon, because we had spent all of our energy every day of the week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to get this business off the ground. And so we're finally in a place where it's established and we're going to get to go on a vacation. And right before we went, the doctor says, come on in before you go vacation. I want to do a biopsy. So we did. We come back from our vacation. This is before cell phones. So I have an answering machine and listen to the messages when you come home. And on the answering machine, it was the doctor saying, when you get back, give us a call. You need to come in to see us. So we go in. I was 31. She was 29. We had 2 boys that were 5 and 6 years old. And we go into the doctor, and he says, got bad news. It's cancer. And we're going to have to cut half your tongue off. And we need to do a neck dissection to see if it spread to the lymph nodes. So we go through that, come out the other side, and find out that it had spread, it had metastasized. And so we went through a really horrific 2-year battle of head and neck cancer. And 2 years from the date after she was diagnosed, she died. And all of that stuff that I had buried spilled over. And it broke me. And then I became really ashamed because I had been told my whole life that a man is defined, his character is defined by how he acts when the hard things happen. And so now I'm ashamed that I can't handle this. And I just became really angry. I knew I was angry. I knew I was bitter. I didn't know what depression was, so I didn't know I was depressed, but I was. And the only way that I knew to feel better about myself was by hurting other people. So, I would go out with my friends and we would pick a fight with somebody, and just for a few minutes, I could breathe. And I would do anything to have that release for just a few minutes, because the weight, I've been hurt all over my body, but nothing hurts like emotional pain to me. Like when it comes to that, check me out. I'm a baby. And I just couldn't deal with it. So we would go picking fights, trying to get just this little fix of relief. One night we got in a really big fight, and the police came, and I jumped in a car with some people I didn't know to get away from the law, and wound up being a drug cartel that was running drugs up and down the West Coast. So I got back to their apartment. I could care less about life or anything at that point. So it's the first night I did a line of cocaine. And it was like, wow, I don't hurt again. And I didn't have to hurt anybody not to hurt. So it started this vicious cycle in my life of using cocaine to try to function during the day and to not feel the pain that was inside, and then trying to drink myself to sleep at night, because you can't sleep unless you do. And it didn't take me long before I wasn't doing it, it was doing me. And I was in Oregon, a long way away from my family and friends, so nobody knew what was happening. And when they finally figured out what was going on, I was in really bad shape, life or death kind of bad shape. And you know what? The people that loved me didn't quit on me. You know, I'm here today because of God, but I wouldn't have ever made it if I didn't have people that were willing to get dirty with me. They were willing to not let me go. They were willing to be present when it was, man, it wasn't fun. It was bad. I can't even tell you how bad it was. That they wouldn't leave me alone. And so I learned a lot from that. They took me to 2 rehabs. I jumped out of the window and ran back home twice. The third time, I stayed because they told me if I didn't, they would take my children away. And I think if I'd lost my kids, I wouldn't be here. Like, it's a sick kind of thing, but I was doing all this stupidity, and yet I love my kids deeply. And I think the thought of not having them would have just, like, I was already on the precipice. And so I went against my will. I went on a hunger strike, trying to rebel against that. And so they put me on suicide watch so they wouldn't let my family or anybody come see me. And this went on for several days, and finally they sent some guys that were in the rehab with me down. I hadn't met anybody yet. They sent them down to talk to me. And there was a doctor and a business guy, just normal everyday people. And life happened. And like me, for whatever reason, none of us had the skill set or the faith to carry us through the difficult times we faced. And so we started self-medicating and wound up in this place. But you know what I saw in them? I saw hope. You know, they weren't better yet. They're still in rehab. But they were better than I was. They weren't on suicide watch. And the competitor in me says, well, gosh, if they can do it, I can do it. And so I started participating. And through participation, they told me, I need to go see a spiritual counselor. This is, I think, to me, the funny part of the story, because it was several years before I recognized how silly this is. But I didn't believe in God. But I was sure angry at him. I've been telling this story all these years, and it didn't even occur to me. How do you say you don't believe in God, but how you were so angry? They told me I need to go see a spiritual counselor, and I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Well, it was just part of the deal. I had to. So I went, and I paid as little attention as I could. I was very angry, and but she was sweet to me, and she said the most genuine, kind things, and I believe it was God that was speaking through her. And I remember the next few nights after starting to participate thinking, somehow I've got to try to build a life back. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to do that. I think I just burned every bridge. I had screwed everything up. It was not redeemable, in my view. I didn't know what I could do. And so after the second night of not sleeping, after meeting with her, I was back in my room. This still gets me. And I just remember thinking, this is impossible. I can't do this. This is it for me. And so in a last-ditch Hail Mary effort, I just fell on my knees and cried out and said, God, I don't even know if you're real or not. But if you are, I quit. And I can't even describe what happened. It was the most beautiful peace. The warmest glow of love. I couldn't stop smiling. I'm in a rehab center. I've lost my wife. I hadn't paid the mortgage on my house for 8 months. I mean, I had ruined everything. And yet I had this joy that makes no sense. And so I've been committed from that day to this day to figure out what it means to quit to a God I didn't know. I'm glad to say I know him today. Man, In the time I have left, I want to share a little bit about the journey from that point to where we are today. You know, I had spent my whole life competing to build the best life for me. I wanted to have status, I wanted to have money, I wanted to have big houses, I wanted to have cars, I wanted to be somebody. And I worked really hard for that. And then all of a sudden, coming out of the other side of that stuff lost its flavor. I don't care. You know what mattered to me? Relationships. Because it was relationships that saved my life. Relationship with people that cared. And the reason they cared is because they have a faith in God. And then because they had a faith in God, now I have it. And it's relationships. I don't know how to do relationships, but I knew that was somehow I needed to find a purpose and a meaning in my life. And, you know, I have these two boys now that are 7 or 8 years old. We were living in Oregon, 2,500 miles away from our family. And so I moved to Dallas to try to start a new life. I had been an entrepreneur my whole life. I started my first company at 14. And when I start trying to get a job, nobody wants to talk to me. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I thought I was all right. And they're like, nobody wants to hire an entrepreneur because you guys don't play by the rules. That's why you're entrepreneurs. So I took a class at a college for recovering entrepreneurs. No kidding. And long story short, it's again about relationships. The first homework assignment they gave is go make a list of everybody that you know that's had a big impact on your life, especially people you haven't talked to a while. And once you've made that list, I want you to spend a week reaching out and contacting them and just say hello. No motive, this isn't about a job, no motive. I just want you to say hello to people that have meant something in your life and tell them how much it meant to you. So my first boss out of college, I called. He was good friends with me and my wife, and so he didn't know what had happened because I'd quit communicating with everybody, so I had to tell him that. It was a difficult call. We hung up, and 3 weeks later he calls me and says, man, will you fly out here to meet with me? So long story short, I go to work for him. 2 years after starting work for him, we were acquired by Blackstone Group, a big private equity firm, and then I start working for Blackstone Group, and I'm back in this world again where my heart longs to be about the things that Christ cares about. Like we're to pray that his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. As Dudley said, we are the hands and feet. Until he returns the second time, between his death and resurrection and his final return, we are the light of the world. We are the hope for the world. We are his hands and feet. And I want to engage with him. I want to partner with him so that we can do work in the world. I just don't know what to do. And so I asked, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Blackstone Group, but it's not a faith-based company. But I was longing for this work, to do this work, to build relationships and to care about people. And I got the people at Blackstone to let me start a meeting at the company. It was a big, big deal, but we finally got it past HR and legal and all this to start a thing we called Soul Shine Sessions. It was just like, you know, in New York City with all of the hustle and bustle and all of the status and the things that people are chasing there, when you go into that building, it's just sick because it's filled with a bunch of people that are sick, like all of us. To varying degrees, we're all still sick. And so we started having these things called Soul Shine Sessions where we would just come talk and build relationships and talk about the things we were struggling with. And it was beautiful, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for more. I went on short-term mission trips, and it just left me longing. And finally, when I was ready, when I was mature enough, when God had grown me to the point where I could be trusted, I think, a friend of mine, I had coffee with, he's my accountability partner, and he said, in the middle of our coffee, I gotta go. I'm like, we just got here, what's going on? He's like, I forgot, I've got a friend that does prison ministry, and one of the guys that was in prison that he met with got released, and he's from this neighborhood in South Dallas called Bonton. You should come down with us. I haven't been yet. I hear it's really scary. In fact, you can't drive into that neighborhood on your own. You have to have them meet you at the floodgates and escort you in. And I think I was just curious. but I went with him. And sure enough, we get to the floodgates of the neighborhood, which is a whole nother story. What are floodgates to a neighborhood? But we get to the floodgates, and there's people waiting for us there, and they escort us into the neighborhood. And we go to this house that this ministry had bought on the very back end of the neighborhood. And we go up to the door, and there's a guy screaming on the other side, yelling. So that doesn't add to my calmness of the situation. And he's yelling, and he never misses a beat when he opens the door. He's got an ankle monitor on. He'd just been released from prison. And he was angry because what he was saying is, I just got released from prison. The terms of my parole say I have to have 3 job interviews a week. And so here's what happens. I can't go anywhere without permission. So I have to call them and say, I have these job interviews. Then they turn around and call the employer and say, do you know that federal inmate number so-and-so and so-and-so says he has a job interview with you on this day and time, and I need to verify that because he's got a monitor on, and he can't go where he doesn't have permission to go. And then, please note that because he has to be there for the time of the appointment, if you go long, police will be dispatched to your premise. And that's what they are told before they get to meet me. How am I ever going to get a job? And the next, until I do, I'm selling dope, which is do ministry in their city or work in the inner city. Nobody goes by the real name. Like, if somebody calls you by your real name, they don't like you. You know, when you get a hood name, you are one of them. You have it's a term of endearment. And so guess what stuck? I'm no way. So I started going down. I fell in love with the people of Bonton. I can't reconcile the fact that Bonton incarcerates the highest percentage of people of all 3,800 zip codes in the state of Texas. We haven't graduated more than 54% of our children from high school in over 40 years. We have the second highest teen birth rate, highest infant mortality rate. We suffer from more than double the rate of cancer, stroke, heart disease, and diabetes, and childhood obesity than the county we're in. If you think of Dallas County as a donut and Bonton as the donut hole, men in our neighborhood will live 12 years less than the average lifespan of a normal man in Dallas County. The outcomes are perverted, but why? Because the people there are beautiful, and they're amazing, and they're resilient. Like I just can't tell you, for those of you that have come to Bonton because of the ministry to see it, you know what I'm saying. They're the most beautiful, capable, resilient people I know. They're my family now. So why the outcomes? And it just turns out that when you establish communities with the history that we have, and then we have civil rights, and so people like me go, well, that happened, so why can't we just move on? And yet you have communities that were established to be set apart because African Americans at the time couldn't live with us. So Bonton, I don't know if you know what a freedmen's community is, but Bonton's a freedmen's community established after slavery. So during emancipation, we're on the banks of the Trinity River. And the reason that it's on the river is because it was a floodplain. Nobody else would build there. So that's where our community got established. And before it was known as Bonton, it was known as Bombtown, because if you're familiar with the story of Black Wall Street, during the time of segregation, black communities flourished because we couldn't eat at your restaurant, we couldn't shop in your store, we couldn't go to your bank, we couldn't get health care in your hospital. And so we collaborated and created all of that in our communities. And then when the prosperity happened, that was met with resistance too. And so in Dallas, we applied for federal funding to build public housing that congregated in density more people with no resources in one place. And what used to be a poor community materially, but rich in relationships, became a congregated place with no resources where we started fighting people over crumbs, each other over crumbs. And now you can lose your life by walking down the wrong street with the wrong color on. But that's a man-made construct. And so if you can imagine living in a community that has no economic development outside of liquor stores and beer and wine stores, if you have a community with no access to health care, a community with no access to groceries, really bad public transportation system, and our communities are isolated by a highway and a railroad and a river, so it's difficult to get to those things that have it. You're a food desert, meaning it's a 3-hour round-trip bus ride to get to the grocery store. And the only access to credit we have are through predatory lenders. And if you combine all that up and then wonder why people struggle there and why they turn to alternative things, and we have this amazing faith that says that we are all made in the image of our Creator. And He has prepared good works in advance for us to do. And then life happens. And the amazing partnership that we get to join Christ on is bridging the gap between who He says we are and what the world has made us be. And it's not just what the world's made us be. We have choices in that too, right? We have to have personal accountability for the things that we do. But the beauty of discipleship to me is this reconciliation between what's happened to us and what we've done and who God says we are and what He's planned for us. And so, I started having this privilege of walking with these men and women from Bonton that were seeking a better life for themselves and didn't know how to get there because of all these barriers. And to watch them flourish, and I got to learn what real discipleship is. Not what we say it is sometimes in these buildings, but what it really means to walk with somebody so that they begin to see Christ in themselves, because you have to be serious enough about your faith that they can see it in you. And then you have to hold them accountable and to teach them the Word of God. And then once they're at a stable place where they're mature in their faith, then you release them to go replicate. And if that were happening consistently in our churches today, the world wouldn't look the way it is. And so if there's one thing that I can tell you is that, man, make disciples. It is the most beautiful gift. You will not have relationships that are as profound and deep as the relationships you build when you're walking with somebody to recognize who God says they are and not what they've done and what the world says they are. It's absolutely beautiful. And then I love the other parts of the scripture, and I love Isaiah 58. This is all throughout Scripture. You can pick a chapter in a book, and it's going to say something in here about this. But I love Isaiah 58:6, where it talks about we live in this fallen world. And when they're talking about fasting, he says, is this not the type of fast I've chose for you? To loose the chains of injustice, to break the cords of the yoke, to set my captives free, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked. Right? And then when you do that, what he promises you your life will look like. Like it's this if and then. It says, if you do this, then watch what I do. It's this beautiful partnership that you alluded to, Dudley. And so, all I can tell you is that the world needs us, the people in this room, to live out our faith in a way that shows the world who we really are. And, in Bonton, we have this thing that we have people come from all walks of life. We have people that are hurt by the church. We have people that are coming out of prison that are Muslim. We have all kinds of things that we deal with there. And yet, almost every day, we have people come to us and say, what is it about you? And what we've learned, and we have this saying in Bonton, if you live a life that demands an explanation, you will never have to hand out another tract. You will never have to sit down and evangelize, because people will come to you and say, tell me what it is about you. I want that. I had a guy that had been incarcerated since he was 8 years old. He got out at 18, went right back in as an adult, got out at 48. And the guy was really hard to love. He didn't know what it was. He'd never experienced it. So when we start trying to love them, there's a lot of times that people that don't know how to love or that have never been loved and that have been hurt by people pretending to love them, they self-sabotage. He stole my car 3 times. And everybody kept telling me, you don't know what you're doing. You're not setting boundaries. You've got to hold people accountable. And I was like, this guy needs to see love. Like he needs to see unconditional love. He is trying to self-sabotage to prove that the love I have for him isn't real. And finally, after the third time of stealing my car, he denied it. I'm like, you stole it in front of our coffee house. We have security cameras. This is you. That's my car. That's you getting in my car, and then it disappears, and you never got out of it. So guess what? You stole my car again. And he finally broke down for the first time. And he's like, and the insight he had, he admitted, like, I don't know how to do this. I've never had a relationship where people didn't try to take advantage of me. And so all I do is take advantage back. And I'm trying to prove that you're not who you say you are, but you won't quit. So I know this is going to be messy, but I want to learn how to love. When you have a guy that's been in prison since he was 8 and tattooed from here down, and a lot of it saying bad things about people that look like me because of the hurt and pain that he's had, to say, I just want to learn how to love. Will you show me? Man, I just don't know how to share with you more about the amazing, I think you said it better. It's this partnership with a living God. And you cannot see, you can't even fathom the kinds of things I get to see every day. You just can't fathom them. Because it's a God that's bigger than anything we could ever do, that's on the other end of the thing, restoring people's lives in a way we can never imagine. And all we really have to do is show up and be available and faithful. You know what? We're not responsible for the outcomes. This is the most liberating job I ever had, because our job is to show up and be faithful and obedient. And if somebody isn't picking up what I'm putting down, that's not my thing. I love them and I care, but I don't own that. Our job is to plant seeds. We're not responsible for the harvest. But man, we better be planting seeds. Lots and lots of seeds. So I hope some of this resonated. I hope some of it made sense. I wish that you could all come see it. I wish that we had time to show you videos of it. I wish that you could meet my friends and family, that you could see the beauty and the amazing things they're doing with their lives. And then I'd love to do what I do when some of my friends that are in the room that are here that come down and say, and as soon as they get up from the table, people say, man, that's the most beautiful woman inside and out I've ever met. That's the most beautiful man inside and out I've ever met. How could they be from Bonton and have gone through all this stuff? I was like, well, wait a minute. Let me tell you who they were. Because you can't recognize it. God makes us new. The old dies and a new is born. And the person that I described to you who I was is not the person standing up here today. Because I am dead and I've been reborn. And it's no longer I that live, but he that lives in me. So, thank you all. Thank you, Dudley.